Continue with the book of Isaiah that we were reading about last week. See, our text comes from the second half of the book. And last week we talked about how this book changes tones in about the 40th chapter. In the second half, it's not about God's connection with people who are proud and privileged. But instead, the prophet Isaiah sends a message where God is speaking to a desperate people who have lost everything, who are hungry, afraid, and homeless. They're refugees without status or rights. Now the prophet sees the plight of the people in exile and is nudged by God to bring a word of hope and promise and a call to live, even in desperate times, by a different standard, to embrace this fierce joy of living as people of God, no matter what the circumstances we find in our lives. To point this strange message out, I'd like you to consider the demonstrations we see in professional sports. Now, I promise not to use professional sports analogies very often, but today it just seemed to fit so well, so please indulge me. Personally, I think that the pageantry in the NFL has gotten a little bit out of hand. It seems like the players are spending as much time choreographing end zone dances as they are practicing the plays that score those points. It all started back in the 70s, and some of you might remember the Nestea plunge. This was a tea that was made out of powder that you mixed in the water, and it was called Nestea. And the commercial would say that it was so refreshing, it was like falling back into a pool of water, and you would just be refreshed. And so football players decided to take on this commercial and do the Nestea plunge when they had a touchdown. They would go up to the end zone and they would just lay out their hands and fall backwards. And that was the 70s. And we thought, okay, you guys are being showboats. But we hadn't seen anything yet, because Ickey Woods came in the 80s. Now, Ickey Woods was famous for creating the Ickey Shuffle. Do you remember what it looked like? It was a couple steps to the right and a couple steps to the left. And what Ickey would do is he was a running back, and he would run through the line and then score a touchdown and begin to dance. And he would dance as if the defense had no power to stop him from dancing. It was natural to celebrate success. But our scripture shows us a different reality than celebrating success. So I want you to imagine a different scenario on that football field. What if the smallest quarterback in the league got ready to be in a big play, in a big game, and instead of what he had hoped would happen, everyone on the other team just blitzed right through the line. It was a jailhouse blitz and just completely overwhelmed him, and all of a sudden the quarterback was on the bottom of this giant pile of man flesh. 350 pounders all over. And what happens was the whistle would blow, all these guys would get up, and there's that little quarterback just sitting there, not even moving. The coach runs out and brings a couple doctors with them, and after a little bit of smelling sauce, well, the quarterback gets up, and he's able to continue. He starts to go into a next play, and he's going to rear back and throw a big pass. But before he can launch that ball, he gets hit in the backside by somebody he never even saw coming. And now he's lost another 20 yards, and he's been piled on top of again, and all those guys jumping on top of him again, and he's all shooken up. Now, he's ready to start the next play, but he's backed up. The field in front of him has doubled in size. He's now got 90 yards instead of 50 yards to get to the end zone. And he's back to the back of his own end zone. So he needs to be cautious. He needs to do something safe. He needs to make sure that nothing else bad happens. But instead, he fumbles the what do you call it? The snap. That's it. Thanks for the help. Assistant preaching is necessary. He fumbles the snap. He fumbles the snap, and the ball just trickles into the end zone. He tries to cover it up, but everybody just jumps on top of him. And what has happened here is called a safety. It's probably the most humiliating thing that can happen in football. It's gotten to the place where everyone on the team knows that they have been completely dominated, where everybody on the team knows that this is the thing that just causes shame. And instead of limping off the field and moping on the sidelines, instead of pointing fingers about who's to blame for letting those guys get by or who was supposed to be somewhere for the catch, what if that quarterback brought his team together in the end zone, talked to him for a second, and all of a sudden you saw a choreographed end zone dance after that type of sack and safety? Would the dominating team feel baffled? Would the crowd start to boo in the stands and wonder, where do you get the gall and throw snowballs? Or would people wonder, what do these guys know? Why can they be happy in the midst of such sorrow? Why are they dancing? It's one thing to dance like Icky after showing the power to overcome the force in front of you, but we're making an entirely different statement when we dance in the face of overwhelming defeat, when we claim victory in the face of earthly powers that have demonstrated that they have what it takes to make us suffer or submit. Make no mistake, things are bad for the Jewish people in exile. The prophet comes to those people and says, what? Isaiah is calling for an end zone dance. He proclaims good news for the oppressed, good news for the brokenhearted, good news to the captives or the prisoners, good news to those who mourn. But this message is puzzling. What's this good news? They get garlands and oil and mantle, and they're decorating like they're ready for a party. Why? Where is the promise of wealth and goods? Where is the promise of vengeance? Where is the righting of the wrongs? The message in Isaiah is that God comes to people who are desperate and tells them to decorate. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem enough. Decorations are nice and all, but they hardly serve to make things better, do they? We can't count on them to change the world. Can they? Why do we bother in the end? Are we just shouting in the darkness? The answer is yes. We are shouting in the darkness in a way, but shouting in the darkness is a noble profession. It's a calling. It's what the prophets were meant to do. It's what the witnesses of God's love are meant to do. When we shout, when we decorate our homes and our churches, when we are not, what we're not saying is that we're unaware of the difficulties in the world. We're not oblivious to the bad news. What we are saying is that we choose to live by good news, by trusting God. We are saying that we choose to live by hope and not despair. But what keeps this from becoming a rose-colored glasses scenario is that there's a prophetic call to act in hope. Look back at Isaiah's words. It's on the front of your bulletin. The Lord brings the good news. The Lord, through the prophet, proclaims the year of the Lord's favor. But then, we are the ones who bind the hearts. We are the ones who set people free and who rebuild. We work because we believe. We build because we hope. And because we hope, we're blessed. And that blessing is lived out in fierce joy and in your face kind of joy that says, no matter what might happen to me, I choose to trust God. The fierce joy that says, no matter what my individual feelings and inclinations might be, I am going to join with the community that's doing good in the world. We light our lights, we put up our garland, and not just to look pretty or to win a neighborhood contest, so that we can declare that darkness is not the final answer. That we are here to say there's a difference. And maybe that looked different when there was 30 people in a room with Jesus and they were declaring darkness is not the final answer, but 2,000 years later, there's 1 billion people in that same community. Do we have a message? Does the world need to hear it? It is the fierce joy that sustains us. Wait. It is the fierce joy in community the shared fierce joy that enables us to bring light to a world that needs to learn to see again. So, listen. Listen to the scripture. Listen with open hearts. Listen to the horns and the choir and the songs. Let us be filled with joy.